She found a stranger's wallet and chased him through a storm just to return it. What she didn't know, he was the vampire king, and it was all a test. Now hunters want her dead, and he won't let her go. The first rays of sunlight broke over the eastern cliffs, painting the ocean below in shades of amber and gold. Mira wiped down the last table in her tavern, humming softly to herself. The morning rush would begin soon, fishermen needing hot coffee before their boats left, travelers wanting bread and eggs before continuing their journeys along the coastal road. She loved these quiet moments before the chaos. The cliffside rest wasn't much to look at. Weathered wooden beams, mismatched chairs, windows that rattled when the wind blew hard, but it was hers. Every copper coin she'd saved for 5 years had gone into buying this place from old Thomas before he retired. Now, at 26, she finally had something that belonged to her alone. The bell above the door chimed. Mira turned, her smile already in place. "Good morning. Welcome to..." The words died in her throat. The man who entered didn't belong here. Not in her humble tavern. Not in this sleepy fishing village. Maybe not even in this century. He wore a long black coat that seemed too fine for travel, with silver buttons that caught the early light. His dark hair was pulled back neatly, and his pale skin suggested someone who avoided the sun. But it was his eyes that made Myra's breath catch, deep crimson, like wine held up to firelight. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Are you open?" Mira blinked, recovering her composure. "Yes, of course. Please sit anywhere you'd like." He chose a corner table, the one with the best view of the ocean. As Mira approached with her notepad, she noticed how still he sat. Most people fidgeted, looked around, drummed their fingers. This man simply existed, perfectly motionless, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. "What can I get you?" she asked. "What would you recommend?" "The vegetable omelet is popular. Fresh herbs from my garden. And the bread. I bake it myself every morning." Something flickered in those crimson eyes. Amusement? That sounds perfect. And coffee black. As Mira worked in the kitchen, she found herself glancing through the serving window. The stranger sat motionless, but his eyes followed every movement in the tavern. When she brought food to the elderly couple at the next table, she saw him watching. When she helped a young mother clean up her child's spilled milk, she felt his gaze. When she stopped to scratch behind the ears of the stray dog that wandered in, she noticed his expression shift. Surprise, maybe. She brought his meal out, setting it carefully on the table.
"Here you are."
"Careful, the plate's hot." "Thank you," he reached for his fork, then paused. "You're very kind to everyone who enters your establishment." Mira laughed. "It's not kindness, sir. It's just decent manners." "Is it?" He took a bite of the omelet, and genuine appreciation crossed his face. "Many would disagree. I've visited countless establishments across this kingdom. Kindness, I've found, is rarer than gold." There was something sad in the way he said it. Mira wanted to ask what he meant, but 3 fishermen burst through the door, laughing loudly and calling for breakfast. The morning rush had begun. For the next hour, Mira barely had time to think. She poured coffee, delivered plates, cleared tables, and laughed at the fishermen's terrible jokes. Through it all, the pale stranger in the corner ate slowly, watching everything with those unsettling crimson eyes. Finally, the rush ended. The fishermen left for their boats, the elderly couple headed home, the young mother gathered her child. The tavern fell quiet again. Mira approached the corner table. "Can I get you anything else?" The stranger stood, pulling a few coins from his pocket and placing them on the table. "No, thank you. The meal was excellent. You have a gift for making people feel welcome." "That's kind of you to say." He smiled, a strange, sad smile, and walked toward the door. The bell chimed as he left. Mira gathered the coins and picked up his plate. That's when she saw it. A wallet. Leather, but not ordinary leather. It was deep burgundy, almost black, with intricate silver patterns worked into its surface. It lay where the stranger had been sitting, partially hidden beneath his napkin. Wait! Mira rushed to the door, but the road outside was empty. She looked left and right. Nothing. How could someone disappear so quickly? She returned to the table, picking up the wallet carefully. It was heavier than expected and warm to the touch. Should she open it? That felt wrong, invasive. But how else would she find out who it belonged to? Taking a deep breath, Mira opened the wallet. Her eyes widened. Inside were coins unlike any she'd ever seen. Gold, yes, but stamped with symbols she didn't recognize, a crown intertwined with thorns, a crescent moon dripping with what looked like tears. The edges were worn smooth, as if they'd passed through countless hands over countless years. There had to be at least 30 of them. This wasn't a small amount of money. This was a fortune. And tucked between the coins was a card made of thick parchment. No name, just an embossed symbol, the same crown and thorns from the coins. Myra's heart raced. The stranger must have forgotten it. Or had he? She thought back to how carefully he'd moved, how aware he'd seemed of everything around him. People that observant didn't accidentally forget their wallets. But if he'd left it deliberately, why? She looked out at the brightening sky. The morning boats were leaving the harbor. If the stranger had come by coach or on foot, he might be heading toward the fishing village 2 miles down the coast. If she hurried, she might catch him. Mira glanced around her tavern. She should stay open. This was prime business time. Closing now meant losing money she couldn't really afford to lose. But those coins, they represented more than money. They represented trust. Someone, a stranger with sad eyes and a kind word about her cooking, had lost something valuable. Maybe something irreplaceable. What kind of person would she be if she just kept it? Or worse, if she didn't even try to return it? Mira made her decision in seconds. She flipped the sign on the door to closed, grabbed her worn shawl, and tucked the wallet safely into her dress pocket. The coastal path stretched before her, winding along the cliffs. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, and the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Mira pulled her shawl tighter and started walking. She didn't notice the figure standing on the tavern's roof, watching her leave. Didn't see the way his crimson eyes tracked her movement with something like wonder. Valerius, king of the vampire courts, had given this test 100 times in 100 towns. Wealthy merchants pocketed the wallet. Poor beggars sold it immediately. Even honest folk usually kept the coins, telling themselves finders were keepers. But this woman, this simple tavern owner with her homemade bread and her kindness towards stray dogs, had closed her business and set out into an approaching storm to return money to a stranger. For the first time in 3 centuries, Valerius felt something he'd almost forgotten.
Surprise.
The wind hit Mira like a physical force as she rounded the first bend in the coastal path. Her shawl whipped behind her, and she had to squint against the spray from waves crashing against the rocks below. The storm was moving in faster than she'd expected. She should turn back. The rational part of her mind screamed it with every step. But the wallet felt heavy in her pocket, a constant reminder of her purpose. That stranger, whoever he was, needed this back. Those coins, those strange, ancient-looking coins, they had to mean something to him. The fishing village of Saltmere came into view after 20 minutes of hard walking. It was smaller than her own town, just a cluster of weather-beaten houses around a small harbor where fishing boats bobbed like toys in the increasingly choppy water. Mira headed straight for the docks, where a group of men were securing boats and hauling in nets ahead of the storm. "Excuse me," she called out, approaching an older man with a gray beard. "Did any of you see a stranger this morning? Tall, pale, wearing a black coat with silver buttons." The fisherman looked up from his rope. "Pale? How pale we talking, miss?" "Very pale. And his eyes, they were red. Dark red, like wine." The men exchanged glances. One of them, younger with a scar across his cheek, straightened up. "Red eyes? You sure about that?" "Yes, I'm certain. He was at my tavern earlier, and he—" "Best stay away from folks with red eyes," the scarred man interrupted. "Nothing good comes from them. Mira frowned. What do you mean? He means superstition, the older fisherman said, shooting his companion a look. Don't mind him. But no, miss, we haven't seen anyone like that. Most travelers take the main road inland. Only locals use the coastal path. Could he have come through earlier? Before dawn. Possible. But in this weather, anyone with sense would have already found shelter. Mira thanked them and moved on to the market square, such as it was. A few vendors were frantically packing up their stalls as the first drops of rain began to fall. She asked each one the same question. A vegetable seller shook her head. A man selling fish looked at her like she was crazy for being out in this weather. An elderly woman selling herbs paused, studying Myra's face. Dark coat, you said? Silver buttons. Yes. Did you see him? Might have. Early this morning, just after sunrise. He asked me about the ferry to La Marin. Myra's heart sank. La Marin was the port city, miles up the coast. The ferry only ran once in the morning and once in the evening. If the stranger had taken it, he was long gone. The ferry already left? She asked, though she knew the answer. Hours ago, dear. Won't be back till sunset, and in this storm, maybe not even then. The old woman squinted at the darkening sky. You should find shelter. This one's going to be nasty. Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if to prove her point. Mira stood in the market square, rain beginning to soak through her shawl, and tried to think. She could wait here until the evening ferry, but what if he wasn't in La Marin? What if he'd gone somewhere else entirely? She'd be stuck here overnight with no money for lodging, her tavern closed, losing a full day of business. But the wallet? She pulled it out, protecting it from the rain with her shawl. The leather seemed to repel water, staying dry even as drops fell all around it. The coins inside clinked softly. Somewhere a man was missing this. Somewhere he might need it desperately. Or he'd left it on purpose, a small voice whispered in her mind. A test, maybe, to see what you'd do. But that was ridiculous. Why would anyone test a random tavern owner? Miss. The herb seller was still watching her. You all right? Yes. Thank you. Mira tucked the wallet away. Is there a place I could stay? If the ferry doesn't run tonight? Old Martha takes in travelers sometimes. 2 houses down from the dock. Blue door, the woman paused. But if you're chasing after a man with red eyes, maybe you should ask yourself why. I'm not chasing him. I'm just trying to return something he lost. Is that all it is? The old woman's gaze was too knowing, too sharp. Be careful, dear. Some things that look lost want to be found. Others are best left alone. Before Mira could ask what she meant, the woman pulled her cart toward a nearby shed, leaving Mira standing in the rain. The storm opened up fully then, rain coming down in sheets. Mira ran for the shelter of a shop's awning, watching water pour down the street. The harbor below churned with gray waves, and the fishing boats strained at their moorings. She looked toward La Marin, invisible in the storm somewhere up the coast. Tomorrow, she decided. She'd take the morning ferry to La Marin. She'd check the lost and found at the city guard office, ask around the port. If she couldn't find him there, she'd come home and what? Keep the stranger's fortune. No. She'd keep looking, however long it took. High above, perched on the roof of the fish market, a figure stood motionless in the pouring rain. Water streamed off his black coat, but he didn't seem to notice. His crimson eyes never left the woman huddled under the awning below. Valerius had stopped testing her the moment she'd left her tavern. Now he was simply watching, fascinated despite himself. She should have given up, should have pocketed the money and gone home. But she hadn't. And somehow that changed everything. The morning ferry cut through calm waters, the storm having passed in the night. Mira stood at the railing, watching La Marin grow larger on the horizon. The port city sprawled across the coastline like a massive creature, its stone buildings climbing up the hillside, its harbor crowded with ships from a dozen different kingdoms. She'd never been to La Marin before. Her whole life had been spent in small coastal towns, where everyone knew everyone, where strangers were rare and exciting. This place looked overwhelming, thousands of people moving like ants through streets she didn't know, speaking in accents she might not understand. The wallet pressed against her side, tucked safely in an inner pocket she'd sewn into her dress last night at Martha's house. The old woman had been kind enough, offering her a bed and a bowl of soup, though she'd asked no questions about the red-eyed stranger. Maybe she'd decided it was none of her business. Or maybe she'd seen the determination in Myra's face and knew questions would be pointless. The ferry docked with a gentle bump. Myra followed the other passengers onto the pier, immediately swallowed by the noise and chaos of the harbor. Sailors shouted in foreign languages. Merchants hawked their goods. Children ran between carts loaded with exotic spices and fabrics. The smell of fish mixed with smoke from countless cooking fires. She stopped a harried-looking woman carrying a basket of bread. "Excuse me, where's the city guard office?" "Which one?" "There's 3-inch.
The
main one? For lost and found." The woman pointed up the hill. "Central Garrison. Market Square. Big building, can't miss it. But they don't open the lost items office till midday." Myra checked the sun's position. At least 2 hours to wait. She thanked the woman and started walking, deciding to look around the market first. Maybe she'd get lucky and spot the stranger herself. The marketplace of La Marin was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Stalls stretched in every direction, selling everything from common vegetables to jeweled daggers, from live chickens to books bound in leather she couldn't identify. Street performers juggled fire. Fortune tellers called out to passers-by. A man with a trained monkey collected coins in a hat. Myra wandered through it all, her eyes scanning every face, looking for pale skin and a black coat with silver buttons. But there were hundreds of people, maybe thousands. Finding one man seemed impossible. She stopped at a fountain in the square center, sitting on its edge to rest her feet. That's when she felt it, the uncomfortable sensation of being watched. Myra turned slowly, scanning the crowd. Nothing seemed unusual, just people going about their business. But the feeling persisted, raising goosebumps on her arms. She stood, deciding to move on, and that's when she saw them. 3 men, standing near a spice merchant stall. They weren't shopping. They weren't talking to each other. They were watching her. And the moment she made eye contact, they started moving in her direction. Myra's heart began to race. She turned and walked quickly toward a busier part of the market, weaving between stalls. When she glanced back, the men were still following, moving with purpose now. She walked faster. They matched her pace. Her mind spun. Were they thieves? Had they somehow seen the wallet? Or was this something else entirely? A narrow alley opened to her left, leading away from the market. It looked dark and uninviting, but the alternative was staying in the open where these men could easily surround her. She made a split-second decision and ducked into the alley. Immediately, she knew she'd made a mistake. The alley was empty, quiet, with high walls on both sides. She ran, her shoes slapping against wet cobblestones, but before she could reach the other end, the 3 men appeared, blocking her path. They were dressed simply, rough clothes, worn boots, but they moved with the confidence of trained fighters. The one in the middle, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running down his neck, stepped forward.
"Easy there, miss.
We just want to talk." Myra backed up, but the alley was a dead end behind her. "I don't know you. Leave me alone." "That wallet in your pocket," the scarred man said, his voice calm but firm. "Where'd you get it?" Her blood turned to ice. How did they know about the wallet? She hadn't shown it to anyone except the design on it, another man said, younger with nervous eyes. "We saw it when you checked it at the fountain." "That's a noble seal. A vampire noble seal." "I found it," Myra said quickly. "Someone left it at my tavern. I'm just trying to return it." The scarred man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Return it? To who? A vampire lord? You expect us to believe you're just an innocent girl helping a bloodsucker?" "I don't know what you're talking about." I don't even know who he is. She's lying, the third man growled. He was older, with gray in his beard and cold eyes. She's a collaborator. Probably been feeding them information, helping them hunt in human territories. That's insane. Myra's voice cracked. I've never even met a vampire before. I just want to return a lost wallet. The scarred man reached for his belt, pulling out a curved knife. Then you won't mind if we take it. Check it for ourselves. See if there's anything in there that tells us where this vampire lord is hiding.
No.
Mira pressed herself against the wall. It's not mine to give you. Wasn't asking permission, girl. They moved forward, and Mira knew with terrible certainty that these men wouldn't just take the wallet. They'd take her too, drag her somewhere for questioning, maybe kill her if they decided she was lying. She opened her mouth to scream. And the world went dark.
No, not dark.
Shadowy. The alley filled with a thick, unnatural fog that seemed to come from nowhere. The three hunters cursed, spinning around, their knives out but useless against something they couldn't see. Through the fog, a figure appeared behind them. Tall, pale, wearing a black coat with silver buttons. The stranger from her tavern. His crimson eyes glowed in the darkness like embers. Gentlemen, he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made even Myra's bones ache. I believe you're frightening my friend. The scarred man's face went white. You. Run, the stranger suggested, and though he didn't raise his voice, the word carried command that couldn't be ignored. The hunters ran, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape the fog-filled alley. The shadows dissipated as quickly as they'd come. Sunlight returned to the alley, revealing Mira pressed against the wall, shaking, and the stranger standing where the hunters had been seconds before. He turned to face her, and for the first time, Mira saw something in those crimson eyes that looked almost like guilt. I think, he said quietly, we need to talk. Mira couldn't move. Her legs felt like water, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The stranger, the vampire, because that's what he had to be, stood perfectly still, giving her space, his hands visible and empty. Her voice came out as a whisper. You're really one of them. I am no denial, no explanation. Just simple truth. And the wallet. You left it on purpose. Something flickered across his face. Regret? Shame? Yes. The betrayal hit her harder than fear. All of this, the storm, the long walk, the terror in this alley, because he'd wanted to test her, to see what some random human would do with his money. Why? The word came out broken, angry. Because I wanted to see if kindness still existed. He took a step closer and Mira flinched. He stopped immediately. In 300 years, I've watched humanity from shadows. I've seen cruelty, greed, violence. I needed to know if there was still goodness. So I've traveled this kingdom, leaving that wallet in 100 different places, waiting to see who would keep it and who would try to return it. And what did you learn? Myra's hands were shaking. That humans are awful? That we're all thieves and liars? No, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. I learned that you're the first person in 100 tries who actually tried to find me. The first who didn't just keep the coins or turn the wallet over to authorities and forget about it. You closed your business. You walked into a storm. You came to a city you'd never seen, looking for a stranger you didn't know. So, congratulations to me, Mira said bitterly. I passed your test. What's my prize? Getting hunted by your enemies. The guilt on his face deepened. Those men were vampire hunters. The crest on the wallet, it's old, recognizable to those who study vampire nobility. I never thought, he paused, something like pain crossing his features. I never considered that carrying it would put you in danger.
That was foolish of me.
Unforgivably foolish. They call me a collaborator, Myra's voice cracked. They thought I was helping vampires hunt humans.
I know.
I heard everything. He moved to the alley's entrance, checking the street beyond. They're gone for now, but they'll report what they saw. That you have the wallet, that I protected you. They'll assume you're working with me. The full weight of it crashed down on Mira. She couldn't just go home now. Those hunters had seen her face, knew she had the wallet. They'd find her tavern, question her neighbors, maybe hurt people she cared about trying to get information she didn't have. This is your fault. She was shaking with anger now, not fear. You and your stupid test. You put me in danger because you wanted to prove some philosophical point about humanity. Yes, he didn't make excuses, didn't try to defend himself. And I'm sorrier than you know. Sorry doesn't help me. Mira pulled the wallet from her pocket and threw it at him. It hit his chest and fell to the ground between them.
Take it.
Take your test and your ancient coins and leave me alone. He bent down slowly, picking up the wallet. But instead of pocketing it, he opened it and pulled out half the coins, holding them out to her. Take these. It's not enough, but it's something. Enough to start over somewhere those hunters won't find you. I don't want your money. You need it, his voice was firm now. Those men know your face. They'll be looking for you. You can't go back to your tavern, not safely. Not for a while. The reality of it made Mira want to scream. Her tavern. Her home. Everything she'd worked for, gone because of one act of kindness toward the wrong person. I'll fix this, the stranger said. I'll find those hunters, convince them you're innocent, that you were just. They saw you protect me. Myra's laugh was brittle. With shadow magic or illusions or whatever that was. How do you explain that away? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're right. Words won't be enough now. He looked up at the sky, thinking. The hunters came from somewhere. Probably the fortress at Greystone, 2 days north. That's where the main vampire hunting guild is based. So what? You're going to attack them? That'll definitely convince them I'm not a collaborator. No, he met her eyes, and she saw determination there. But I can find out how many people know about you, how far the information has spread. If it's contained to just those 3 men, there might be a way to manage the situation. Manage it how? I don't know yet. For the first time, he sounded uncertain. But I caused this. I put you in danger with my arrogance. I won't leave you to face the consequences alone. Mira wanted to tell him to disappear, to leave her to figure this out herself. But the truth was, she had no idea what to do. She was a tavern owner who'd never been in a fight, who knew nothing about vampire hunters or nobles or any of this. I don't even know your name, she said quietly. He hesitated. Valerius. Just Valerius? For now, yes. There was clearly more to it, but Mira was too exhausted to push. She slumped against the alley wall, suddenly feeling every hour of lost sleep from the night before. Those hunters, she said. They'll tell others, won't they? Probably. And then more will come looking for me. Yes. Mira closed her eyes. So what do we do?
We.
Valerius sounded surprised. You said you wouldn't leave me to face this alone. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. So what do we do? For a moment, something like respect crossed his face. Then he straightened, his expression becoming focused, determined. We disappear, he said, before more hunters arrive. I know places in this city where even they won't find us. We hide, we plan, and we find a way to clear your name. And if we can't, his jaw tightened. Then I'll make sure you're safe anyway, whatever it takes. The Valerius led her to wasn't the kind Mira had imagined. No grand entrance, no painted signs swinging in the breeze. Just a narrow door wedged between a chandler's shop and a boarded-up warehouse, easy to miss if you didn't know to look for it. He knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. A slot in the door slid open, revealing suspicious eyes. Passage, Valerius said simply. The door opened. Inside, a heavy-set woman with iron-gray hair looked Valerius up and down, then glanced at Mira with raised eyebrows. Didn't know you traveled with companions these days. It's temporary. We need a room. Quiet. Discreet. All my rooms are discreet. That's why you pay triple. The woman held out her hand. Valerius placed several coins in her palm, regular currency this time. Mira noticed, not the ancient gold from his wallet. The woman bit one, nodded, and gestured toward a dark staircase. 3rd floor, end of the hall. I don't ask questions, but I also don't tolerate trouble. Hunters come sniffing around, you're both out. Understood. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chair, and a window that looked out over the alley behind the building. Mira sat on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She hadn't slept properly in 2 days, had barely eaten, and her whole life had been turned upside down. Valerius remained standing by the window, watching the alley below like a statue. You should rest, he said without turning around. I can't. Myra's hands twisted in her lap. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men. Their knives. The way they looked at me, like I was already guilty. They're trained to be suspicious. It keeps them alive in a dangerous profession. Hunting vampires, you mean? Yes. Mira studied his back, the way he held himself so still. Are you? Do you hunt humans? No, the answer was immediate, firm. I haven't fed from a human in over a century. There are other ways. But you could, if you wanted to. He turned then, and the sadness in his eyes was ancient. I could. Many of my kind do. But I stopped because every time I took blood from a human, I saw the fear in their eyes. Eventually, I couldn't bear adding more fear to a world already drowning in it. It wasn't the answer she'd expected. Mira had grown up on stories of vampires as monsters, soulless creatures who preyed on humans without conscience. But Valerius spoke like someone who carried the weight of his choices, who remembered every face, every moment of fear he'd caused. Why do the test then, she asked. Why not just observe people naturally? Because people behave differently when they don't know they're being tested. When they think no one's watching, he moved away from the window, finally sitting in the chair. I needed to see what humans would do when faced with temptation and no consequences. Most kept the wallet. Some tried to use the coins but couldn't. They're too old, not accepted as currency anymore. A few turned it into local authorities. But you, he shook his head. You hunted for me. Through a storm, to another town, into a city you'd never seen.
Why?
Mira thought about it. Because it wasn't mine. Because someone losing that much money, it could ruin them. I kept thinking about how worried they'd be, how desperate they might feel. I couldn't just keep it and live with myself. Most people could. Then most people are comfortable with themselves in ways I'm not. She pulled off her shoes, rubbing her aching feet. My mother used to say that character is what you do when nobody's looking. She died believing I'd grow up to be someone good. I couldn't. I can't let her down, even if she's gone. Valerius was quiet for a long moment. She would be proud of you. Would she? Myra's laugh was bitter. I'm hiding in a criminal's inn, marked as a vampire collaborator, unable to go home. All because I try to do the right thing. You did do the right thing. The consequences aren't your fault. They're mine. He leaned forward, his crimson eyes intense. I promise you, Mira, I will fix this. However long it takes.
How?
Those hunters saw your face too. They know what you look like. They saw a vampire protecting a human. That's unusual, but not unheard of. Some of my kind keep human servants, guards, informants. They'll assume you're one of those, he paused. The real problem is that they'll report to their guild. Once it's in official records, more hunters will come. They'll be systematic, thorough. Looking for me. Looking for both of us. But mostly you, because humans are easier to track than vampires, he stood, pacing now. I need to know how fast information travels in the Hunter network, who's in charge of this region, whether they'll send a team or just add you to a watch list. And how do you plan to find that out? Valerius smiled, and for the first time, it had an edge to it. I have contacts. People who owe me favors. It'll take time, but... A sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, stopping outside their door. Valerius moved faster than Myra's eyes could follow, positioning himself between her and the door. His hand went to his coat, pulling out a thin blade that seemed to materialize from nowhere. 3 sharp knocks. Valerius, a woman's voice, low and urgent. I know you're in there.
We need to talk. Now.
He relaxed slightly, but didn't lower the blade. How did you find me? I always know where you are. You know that. Another knock, more insistent. Let me in before someone sees me standing out here. Valerius looked at Mira, some silent question in his eyes. She nodded, not sure what else to do. He opened the door. The woman who entered was tall, with dark skin and silver hair braided down her back. She wore leather armor that had seen better days, and her eyes, golden like a cat's, swept the room before landing on Mira. So it's true, she said. You really did pick up a human. Celeste, this isn't. The hunters are mobilizing, Celeste interrupted. 3 different chapters. They think she's your informant, that you're building a network in the coastal territories, her golden eyes fixed on Mira. They're not just looking for you, girl. They've put a bounty on your head. 500 gold crowns. Dead or alive. Mira felt the blood drain from her face. 500 gold crowns. That was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Enough to make anyone, neighbors, friends, strangers, consider turning her in. That's excessive, Valerius said, his voice tight. For a supposed informant? They must think she's more than that. Celeste's golden eyes narrowed. They think she's your consort. That you're planning to turn her, use her to infiltrate human settlements. The hunter who reported it, man with a scarred neck, he's claiming she carries your seal, that you used blood magic to protect her. It was shadow manipulation, nothing more. They don't care about the distinction. Celeste moved to the window, checking the street below. Words spreading fast. By sunset, every bounty hunter, mercenary, and desperate fool in La Marin will be looking for a brown-haired woman traveling with a pale man in a black coat. Then we leave before sunset, Valerius said. No, Celeste turned sharply. They're already watching the gates. North, south, and east are covered. The harbor's being monitored. You're trapped in the city until they move resources elsewhere. Mira stood on shaking legs. I need to go to the guard. Explain that this is all a misunderstanding. I'm not his informant or his consort or... They'll arrest you on sight, Celeste interrupted. Hunter bounties supersede city law. You walk into a guard station, you walk into a cell. Then they hand you over to whoever claims you first. So, what am I supposed to do? Myra's voice rose. Hide forever? Never go home? Give up everything, because of one act of kindness. Celeste looked at Valerius. You really didn't think this through, did you? I'm aware of my mistakes. Awareness doesn't fix them. She crossed her arms. There's one option. The old stone bridge, at the eastern edge of the city. It crosses into neutral territory, land claimed by neither humans nor vampires. Get her there by dawn, and I can have someone meet you. Someone who can get her out of La Marin and to a safe house in the borderlands. Who? Valerius asked. Does it matter? It's her best chance. Celeste headed for the door.
The bridge. Dawn.
Don't be late. She left as quickly as she'd arrived, leaving silence in her wake. Mira sat back down on the bed, her mind spinning. Neutral territory. That's real?
Yes.
Lands where old treaties still hold power. Neither side can claim authority there without breaking ancient accords. Valerius returned to the window. It's not permanent safety, but it's a start. And then what? I live in the borderlands forever? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Mira looked at her hands. They were rough from work, scarred from kitchen accidents and years of labor. Honest hands. Her mother's hands. And now they'd never serve breakfast to fishermen again, never knead bread in her own kitchen, never wipe down the tables at the cliffside rest. I hate you, she said quietly. Valerius flinched, as if she'd struck him. I know. Your test. Your arrogance. You destroyed my life to prove a philosophical point. Yes. And now you want me to run? To hide? To let them win? He turned from the window, surprise on his face. What else can you do? Mira stood, something hard crystallizing in her chest. Anger.
Pure rajtja sanger.
I can tell the truth. The real truth. Not to city guards or hunters, but to people. Regular people who might actually listen. That's too dangerous. More dangerous than having a price on my head? She moved toward him, You want to fix this? Then help me get to the bridge. But not to run. To speak. Mira. Those hunters made assumptions. They saw what they expected to see, a collaborator, a traitor. But what if I stand there, in public, and tell everyone exactly what happened? That I found a lost wallet and tried to return it. That I didn't know it belonged to a vampire. That I'm not anyone's servant or informant, just a tavern owner who made a mistake. They won't believe you. Maybe not. But some might. And that doubt, that's worth more than running, she held his gaze. Unless you'd rather I just disappear. Make things easier for you. Something shifted in Valerius's expression. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. You're braver than I gave you credit for. I'm terrified, Mira admitted. But I'm also done being treated like a criminal when my only crime was kindness. They waited until the gray hour before dawn, when the city was caught between sleep and waking. Valerius led Mira through back alleys and forgotten passages, always moving, always watching. Twice they heard voices, hunters, maybe, or city guards, and had to backtrack. The old stone bridge finally appeared through morning mist. It was ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of use, spanning a narrow gorge where dark water rushed below. On the far side, the land turned wild, untamed forest where neither kingdom held sway. They were halfway across when figures emerged from both sides. 7 men, all armed. The scarred hunter from the alley stood among them, his face twisted with satisfaction. "End of the line," he called out. "Girl, you're coming with us. The vampire, you're free to go. This isn't your fight." Valerius moved in front of Mira, his voice dropping to that dangerous, commanding tone. "Move aside. Can't do that. She's worth too much money." The scarred man drew his sword. "Last chance. Walk away."
No.
The hunters charged. Valerius moved like liquid shadow, faster than Myra's eyes could track. He disarmed the first man with a casual gesture, sent the second flying into the bridge's stone railing. But there were too many, and they were trained for this. They spread out, attacking from multiple angles, forcing him back. One of them broke through, grabbing Myra's arm. She screamed, struggling, and then light exploded across the bridge. Not shadow this time. Pure, brilliant light that made every hunter stagger back, shielding their eyes. Valerius stood at the bridge's center, and Mira finally understood. The way the hunters were treated. The deference in Celeste's voice. The ancient coins and the formal crest. "You're not just a vampire," she whispered. "You're the vampire king," Valerius said, his voice echoing with power that made the very stones tremble. His crimson eyes blazed, and when he spoke again, every hunter on that bridge dropped to their knees. "And this woman is under my protection."
Leave. Now.
The hunters fled like scattered leaves in a storm, stumbling over themselves in their desperation to escape. Within seconds, the bridge was empty except for Mira and Valerius. No, not just Valerius. The vampire king. The light faded, leaving only dawn's natural glow. He turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable, even. "You lied to me," Mira said. Her voice wasn't angry. She was too exhausted for anger. Just hollow. "The whole time, I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." She backed away from him, her legs hitting the bridge's stone railing. Below, the dark water churned. "A king. You're a king, and you were testing random humans like we're
What?
laboratory rats? Entertainment." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Now the anger came, burning through her exhaustion. "Explain it to me. Make me understand why a king would waste his time testing a tavern owner's honesty." Valerius was quiet for a long moment, his crimson eyes fixed on the rushing water below. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost fragile. "Because I've lived for 3 centuries, Mira. 300 years of watching kingdoms rise and fall, of seeing humans and vampires tear each other apart over fear and hatred. I've sat on a throne and made decisions that affected thousands of lives, and with each passing decade, I felt less connected, less certain that any of it mattered. He looked up at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like pain. I needed to know if there was still good in this world. Real good, not performed good. Not people being kind because law or society demanded it, but because they chose to be.
So I started the tests.
Leaving my wallet in different places, watching what people did when they thought no one would ever know. And what did you learn? Myra's voice was bitter. That were all disappointments. I learned that most people are practical. They see money, they take it. Not out of malice, but survival.
Some feel guilty about it.
Most rationalize it. A few turn it into authorities and forget about it, letting it become someone else's problem. He took a step toward her. But you closed your entire business. You walked through a storm. You came to a city you'd never seen, spent money you probably couldn't afford to spend, all to return something to a stranger who said a few kind words about your cooking. So I'm special? Is that supposed to make this better? You're extraordinary, he said quietly. And I destroyed your life because of it. The admission hung between them. Mira wanted to argue, to throw his words back at him. But what was the point? He was right. Her life, as she knew it, was over. The cliffside rest, her quiet existence, her simple routines, all gone because the vampire king had decided to test humanity's goodness, and she'd been unlucky enough to pass. Those coins, she said. In your wallet. They're real royal currency, aren't they? From when vampires openly ruled. From the first age. Before the wars. Before the treaties that divided our kingdoms. Back when vampires and humans lived in, not harmony, but open coexistence, he pulled out the wallet, running his thumb over the crest. I carry it as a reminder of what we lost. And now hunters think I'm your consort, Mira laughed, a broken sound. They think you're trying to rebuild some kind of vampire empire with me as your human liaison. I'll fix it. I'll issue a royal decree. Send messengers to every hunter chapter. I'll make it clear you're innocent, that this was all a mistake. Mira finished. A misunderstanding? Will they believe a vampire king's word about a human woman? Or will they think you're lying to protect your asset? Valerius closed his eyes. You're right. My word might make things worse. Then what? Mira moved away from the railing, her exhaustion turning into something harder. What's your plan, Your Majesty? Send me to some safe house where I hide forever? Give me gold, and tell me to start over somewhere new? Pretend none of this happened. I don't know. The words burst from him, raw and honest. I don't know how to fix this. I've ruled a kingdom for centuries, negotiated treaties, ended wars, but I don't know how to undo the damage I've caused one honest woman. Silence fell between them, broken only by the river's rush below. Mira studied him, really looked at him for the first time since learning who he was. He stood like a man defeated, his shoulders curved inward, his ancient eyes shadowed with guilt. A king who'd forgotten how to be human, who'd tested humanity to find something he'd lost in himself. The wallet, she said. Give it to me. He looked up, confused, but held it out. Mira took it, opened it, and pulled out the ancient coins. One by one, she threw them into the river below. What are you doing? Valerius reached for her hand, but she stepped back. You wanted to test me? She threw another coin. You wanted to see what I'd do with your money? Another coin disappeared into the rushing water. Here's your answer. I don't want it. I don't want her gold, your protection, or your guilty conscience. The last coin glinted in the dawn light before vanishing. I want my life back. The one you took from me. She thrust the empty wallet into his chest. He caught it reflexively, staring at her with something like awe. You just threw away a fortune, he said. It was never mine to keep. Myra's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Just like my honesty was never yours to test. You say I'm extraordinary? I'm not. I'm just a person who tried to do the right thing. The fact that you think that's extraordinary says more about your world than mine. Valerius looked down at the empty wallet, then back at her. You're right. About all of it, he tucked the wallet away slowly.
I'm sorry, Mira. Truly.
It's not enough, but it's all I have. No, she said quietly. It's not enough. She turned and walked off the bridge, leaving the vampire king standing alone in the dawn light. Mira made it 3 blocks into the neutral territory before her legs gave out. She collapsed against a moss-covered stone wall, her whole body shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation drained away, leaving only terror in its wake. She'd just thrown a fortune into a river, yelled at the vampire king, walked away from the only person who could potentially protect her. What had she been thinking? The forest around her was silent except for bird calls and rustling leaves.
No hunters. No guards.
Just wilderness that stretched for miles in every direction. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time since this nightmare began. Mira pulled her knees to her chest, finally letting the tears come. She cried for her tavern, for the life she'd built, for the simple morning routines she'd never have again. She cried for her stupidity in opening that wallet, for her stubbornness in trying to return it, for every choice that had led her to this moment. When the tears finally stopped, the sun had risen higher. She needed to move, to find shelter, to figure out what to do next. But where could she go? The safe house, Celeste mentioned? That required trusting more vampires, and Mira wasn't sure she could trust anyone anymore. A twig snapped behind her. Mira spun around, her heart in her throat. A woman emerged from the trees, not Celeste, someone younger, with auburn hair and simple traveling clothes. She held her hands up, showing she was unarmed. Easy, the woman said. I'm not here to hurt you. Celeste sent me. I don't want vampire help. Good, because I'm human. The woman came closer, moving slowly. Name's Kara. I run one of the safe houses in the Borderlands. Celeste asked me to watch the bridge, said there might be someone who needed extraction. Extraction, Mira laughed bitterly. Like I'm a spy in enemy territory. Aren't you? Kara crouched down nearby. You've got hunter chapters from 3 regions looking for you. That's not casual. That's coordinated. Someone high up wants you badly, because they think I'm working with the vampire king. Are you? No. Myra's voice cracked. I found his wallet. I tried to return it. That's all. I didn't know who he was, didn't know what the crest meant. I was just trying to be decent. Kara studied her face, then nodded slowly. I believe you. Most people who work with vampires have a certain look, hard, calculating. You just look tired and scared. She sat down properly. But believing you doesn't change the situation. The hunters don't know you're innocent, and even if they did, 500 gold crowns makes people conveniently forget innocence. So, what am I supposed to do? Come with me. The safe house is 2 days' walk from here. You can rest, figure out your next move. Maybe wait for things to cool down. And if they don't cool down? Kara's expression was sympathetic. Then you learn to live a different life. New name, new town, new everything. It's not ideal, but it's survival. Before Mira could respond, voices echoed through the forest. Men's voices, getting closer. Damn it, Kara whispered. They're tracking faster than I expected. Come on, we need to move. I thought this was neutral territory. They can't hunt here. They're not supposed to, but a 500 gold bounty makes people break rules. Kara pulled Mira to her feet. Follow me. Stay quiet. They moved through the forest, Kara leading them along a narrow path that looked more animal trail than human road. Behind them, the voices grew louder. There had to be at least 6 or 7 men, moving with purpose, calling out coordinates to each other. They're organized, Mira whispered. Professional bounty hunters, probably. The serious kind. Kara picked up the pace. The hunter guilds put out the initial bounty, but once word spread to the mercenary networks, everyone wants a piece. They ran until Myra's lungs burned, until her legs felt like they might collapse. The voices fell behind, but didn't disappear. These hunters were persistent. Finally, they reached a small clearing with a stream running through it. Kara stopped, breathing hard. We can't outrun them, she said. But we can outsmart them, she pointed downstream. Follow the water for half a mile. There's an old fox den on the south bank, big enough for you to hide in. Wait until nightfall, then continue east. You'll hit the main road eventually. What about you? I'll lead them north, away from you. Kara pulled off her pack, handing it to Mira. There's food, water, a map. Everything you need. They'll catch you. Maybe. But I'm good at disappearing, Kara smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Besides, I signed up for this kind of thing. You didn't. Before Mira could argue, Kara was gone, running loudly through the underbrush, making sure the hunters heard her. Mira stood frozen for a moment, clutching the pack. Another stranger helping her. Another person putting themselves at risk because of choices she'd made. The voices shifted direction, following Kara's noise. Mira ran downstream, splashing through the cold water, looking for the fox den. She found it just as the sun reached its peak, a hollow beneath tree roots, dark and earthy, but blessedly empty. She crawled inside, pulling branches over the entrance, and waited in the darkness. Hours passed. She heard the hunters pass by twice, their voices frustrated. One of them mentioned doubling back to Lumarin, reporting that the target had escaped into deep forest. Commander Aldrich won't be happy, one said. Commander Aldrich is never happy, another replied. But the king's orders were clear. Find the girl, bring her in alive. She's the key to finding the vampire noble. They moved on, their voices fading. Mira sat in the darkness, her mind racing. Commander Aldrich. King's orders. This wasn't just about a bounty anymore. This was political. And somewhere in Lumarin, people were making plans that would determine whether she lived or died. Mira waited until the forest fell completely silent before emerging from the fox den. Her body ached, her clothes were filthy, and every sound made her jump. But the hunters were gone, at least for now. She pulled out Kara's map, studying it in the fading light. The safe house was marked with a small X, 2 days' journey east. But between here and there were several marked danger zones, hunter patrol routes, apparently. Going overland would be suicide. A note was scrawled in the map's margin. If compromised, use the old rails. Entrance at Millstone Gorge. Mira traced the thin line that represented the abandoned rail system. It cut straight through the mountains, bypassing all the patrol routes. The tunnels had been built decades ago during the vampire-human wars, used to move supplies and troops quickly. Now they were supposedly abandoned, forgotten.
Also, probably terrifying.
But terrifying was better than captured. She packed up and started walking, using the map and the setting sun to navigate. By the time she reached Millstone Gorge, full darkness had fallen. The entrance to the rail tunnel was exactly where the map indicated, a gaping black mouth carved into the mountainside, rusted rails disappearing into absolute darkness. Mira stood at the entrance, trying to convince herself to enter. Every instinct screamed against walking into that darkness. Anything could be in there, cave-ins, wild animals, or worse. Having second thoughts, she spun around, her heart hammering. Valerius stood at the edge of the trees, his black coat making him nearly invisible in the darkness. You followed me, Mira said, anger and relief warring in her voice. I never left. He moved closer, and she could see the guilt still etched in his features. I've been tracking you since you left the bridge. Keeping distance, staying out of sight. But I couldn't just abandon you. I told you I don't want your help. I know. He looked at the tunnel entrance. But you need it anyway. Those tunnels are treacherous. Cave-ins, unstable sections, places where the rails just end at cliff edges. You'll die in there alone. Maybe that's my choice to make.
It is, he agreed.
But I'm asking you to make a different one. Let me guide you through. I know these tunnels, used them during the wars. Once we reach the other side, I'll leave you alone. You'll never see me again. Mira wanted to refuse. Wanted to prove she didn't need a vampire king's protection. But the tunnel's darkness was absolute, and she could hear water dripping somewhere deep inside, echoing like whispers.
Fine, she said.
But once we're through, you're gone. No more following, no more watching from shadows. I want my life back, whatever form that takes now. You have my word. They entered the tunnel together. Valerius moved with confidence, his vampiric vision allowing him to see what Mira couldn't. He took her hand. His skin was cool but not unpleasantly so, and led her forward along the old rails. Stay on the ties, he instructed. The ground between them isn't stable. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. The darkness was complete, oppressive. Myra's free hand brushed against the tunnel wall occasionally, feeling rough stone and moisture. The air grew colder the deeper they went. Why are you really helping me? Mira asked finally, her voice echoing strangely. Guilt? Obligation? Or is this part of some other test? No more tests, his voice came from just ahead of her. I'm helping because in 3 centuries, I'd forgotten what it felt like to meet someone genuinely good. Someone who would sacrifice their own well-being for a stranger's benefit. You reminded me of something I'd lost. What? Hope. The word was quiet, almost swallowed by the tunnel's darkness. Hope that despite all the cruelty and violence, despite centuries of war and mistrust, there are still humans worth protecting, worth caring about. Mira felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that. But understanding, maybe. A glimpse of the loneliness that must come with living for 300 years, watching everyone you might care about age and die while you remained unchanging. The hunters mentioned someone named Commander Aldrich, she said. And King's orders. What king? I thought this was just about a bounty. Valerius stopped walking. You heard that. They passed near where I was hiding. They said I was the key to finding the vampire noble, she paused. They don't know you're the king, do they? Very few humans do. Our kingdoms maintain separate governance, separate lands. I rule vampire territories, your king rules human territories, and we maintain an uneasy peace through treaties and distance. He started walking again. But if someone believes I'm building a network in human lands, breaking those treaties, it could justify military action. Not just hunters, armies. The weight of it pressed down on Mira. This is bigger than me.
Yes.
And it's my fault for not considering the political implications of my actions. His hand tightened slightly on hers. Commander Aldrich is the head of your king's elite hunter division. If he's involved, this has reached the highest levels of human government. They walked on, and gradually Mira became aware of a change. The air moved differently, carrying fresher scents. Ahead, a tiny pinprick of light appeared. The exit, she asked hopefully. Not quite. We're only halfway through. That's one of the old station chambers, where they used to store supplies and rest between journeys. The chamber opened up around them, large enough that their footsteps echoed. Moonlight streamed through cracks in the ceiling where the rock had collapsed, creating pools of silver light on the stone floor. Old crates were stacked against walls, their wood rotted and broken. And in the center of the chamber, sitting on one of those crates, was a man in hunter's armor. He looked up as they entered, his weathered face breaking into a cold smile. Well, he said, standing slowly. The vampire king himself. This is quite a catch. His hand moved to his sword. And the girl, of course. Commander Aldrich will be very pleased. More figures emerged from the shadows. 6 hunters, all armed, all blocking the tunnel exits. How did you know we'd come this way? Valerius moved in front of Mira, his voice deadly calm. The leader, Aldrich, it had to be, laughed. We've been watching these tunnels for 2 days, ever since our scouts reported unusual activity. We knew someone would use them eventually, his eyes fixed on Mira. We just didn't expect such valuable prey. You're in neutral territory, Valerius said. This violates the treaties. So does a vampire king conducting secret operations in human lands. Aldrich drew his sword, the blade gleaming with a faint blue light, spelled silver, Mira realized, designed to hurt vampires. The treaties are already broken. We're just responding appropriately. The other hunters drew their weapons, forming a semicircle. Valerius's voice dropped to that commanding tone that made the air itself feel heavy. Let the girl go. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, we'll take you both, Aldrich smiled. But the girl first. She's fragile. You, your majesty, will deal with properly. They charged. Valerius moved like lightning. The chamber exploded into chaos. Shadows writhing, hunters shouting, steel clashing against stone. Mira couldn't track what was happening. One moment Aldrich was lunging forward. The next he was sprawled across the floor, his sword clattering away. Two hunters flanked left and right, but Valerius was somehow between them, redirecting their momentum so they crashed into each other. But even he couldn't fight 7 trained vampire hunters simultaneously. A blade sliced across his arm, drawing black blood. Another hunter's spelled silver dagger found its mark in his shoulder, and Valerius actually cried out, the first sound of pain Mira had heard from him. Run, he shouted at her. The east tunnel, go. Mira stood frozen, watching him fight. He was powerful, but the hunters were coordinated, experienced. They knew how to fight vampires, knew how to use spelled weapons, knew how to work as a unit. They were going to kill him. And part of her wanted to let them. Wanted to run, like he said, to save herself, to let the vampire king face the consequences of his own arrogance. But she saw his face as another blade cut deep into his side. Saw genuine fear there. Not for himself, but for her. He was holding back, trying not to kill the hunters, trying to give her time to escape. Even now, wounded and outnumbered, he was protecting her. Mira grabbed a broken piece of timber from a rotted crate and swung it as hard as she could at the nearest hunter's head. The wood connected with a sickening crack. The hunter dropped, stunned. What are you doing? Valerius gasped. Something stupid. Mira grabbed a second piece of wood, brandishing it like a club. We run together or not at all. Aldrich barked orders, 2 hunters breaking off to pursue Mira. She ran toward the east tunnel, not looking back, hearing Valerius curse and then the sounds of renewed fighting as he intercepted her pursuers. The tunnel ahead was partially collapsed, a narrow gap at the top where moonlight filtered through. Mira scrambled up the rubble, her hands scraping on sharp rocks, and squeezed through the opening. She emerged into forest, proper forest, not the managed neutral territory, but wild, ancient growth. Behind her, she heard explosions of sound as Valerius fought his way clear. Then he was beside her, blood staining his coat, his breathing labored. Keep moving, he gasped. They'll follow. They ran. Myra's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but terror drove her forward. Behind them, she heard the hunters emerging from the tunnel, heard Aldrich shouting coordinates and search patterns. The forest thickened, the trees growing so close together that moonlight barely penetrated. Valerius led them up a steep hillside, over fallen logs, through streams that soaked Myra's already filthy clothes. Just when she thought she couldn't run another step, he pulled her into what looked like a solid wall of ivy. Behind the ivy was a structure, stone walls covered in moss and vine, ancient and forgotten. Inside, Valerius whispered, and they slipped through a gap in the stonework. The ruins were extensive. What had once been a grand building, a temple, maybe, or a manor house, was now just broken walls and a partially intact roof. But it was shelter and, most importantly, hidden. They collapsed against an interior wall, both breathing hard. Outside, the sounds of pursuit grew closer, then gradually faded as the hunters moved past their hiding spot. Silence fell. Mira looked at Valerius in the dim light filtering through cracks in the roof. His wounds were still bleeding, the spelled silver preventing his natural healing. You're hurt, she said. I'll survive. Silver slows healing but doesn't stop it entirely. He pressed a hand to his side, wincing. Though I'd heal faster without it embedded in my shoulder. Can you reach it? Not at this angle, he tried, then gave up with a frustrated sound. I'll manage. Mira stared at him for a long moment. Then, before she could overthink it, she moved closer. Let me help. Mira, You don't have to. I know, she knelt beside him. But you got hurt protecting me. Again. So stop being noble and let me help. He studied her face, then slowly nodded. The dagger is in my left shoulder. You'll need to pull it straight out, quickly. It will hurt. You or me? A ghost of a smile. Both, probably. Mira positioned herself, gripping the dagger's hilt. The spelled silver made her fingers tingle unpleasantly. On 3.
1.
2-inch. She pulled on 2, yanking the blade free before he could tense up. Valerius's jaw clenched, but he made no sound. Black blood welled from the wound, then slowly began to clot. Warn a man next time, he said through gritted teeth. You would have tensed up. Mira tossed the dagger away, watching as his supernatural healing began to work, the wound knitting itself closed. That's unsettling to watch. Imagine experiencing it for 3 centuries. They sat in silence, listening to the forest outside. Eventually, the sounds of hunters faded completely. They'd moved on, continuing their search elsewhere. You should have run, Valerius said quietly. When I told you to, you could have escaped. Probably. So why didn't you? Mira pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly exhausted. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the test and destroying my life, you've been trying to protect me. And she paused, searching for words. I couldn't just let them kill you. Even if part of me thinks you deserve it. I do deserve it. Maybe, she looked at him directly. But you also stopped those hunters on the bridge, without killing them. Fought tonight without lethal force, even though it put you at greater risk. You're not the monster the stories describe. You barely know me. I know enough, she leaned her head back against the stone. You're arrogant, you make terrible decisions, and your idea of testing humanity was incredibly stupid. But you're also lonely and guilty, and trying in your own broken way to do better. Valerius was quiet for a long moment. You see too much. Someone has to. Mira closed her eyes, the exhaustion finally winning. We can't stay here long, can we?
No.
By dawn they'll expand their search grid. We have maybe a few hours to rest. Then what? Then I tell you the rest of the truth. His voice was heavy. About why I really started the tests. About what I've been searching for all these years. And about the choice you're going to have to make. Mira wanted to ask what he meant, but sleep pulled at her like a tide. She let it take her, trusting, against all logic, that when she woke, the vampire king would still be there. Still protecting her. Still trying to fix what he'd broken. Mira woke to voices outside the ruins. Not hunters' voices, these were different. Locals, maybe, or travelers. Her eyes flew open, finding Valerius already awake, crouched by a gap in the wall, watching. How long was I asleep? She whispered. 3 hours. Just before dawn, he moved back from the wall. Those are woodcutters heading to the logging sites. We're closer to civilization than I thought. Mira joined him, peering out. Through the trees, she could see a dirt road, and beyond that, morning mist rising from what looked like ocean. Ocean. Wait, she said, recognition dawning. I know where we are. That cliff line. That's near Saltmere. We've come full circle. Valerius studied the view, then nodded slowly. The tunnels run in a loop through the mountains. We're only 10 miles from where this all started. From your tavern. Something twisted in Myra's chest. Home was so close. The cliffside rest, her garden, her quiet life. All of it within reach. All of it impossible to return to. You said you'd tell me the truth, she said, sitting back against the wall. About why you really started the tests. Valerius settled across from her, and in the growing dawnlight, he looked tired. Not physically, vampires didn't tire that way, but emotionally. The weight of centuries visible in his crimson eyes. 200 years ago, he began, I had a human friend. A scholar named Thomas who studied vampire-human relations, who believed our races could truly coexist. We spent decades working together, drafting treaties, building trust between our peoples. He paused. Then war broke out. a misunderstanding that spiraled into violence. Thomas tried to stop it, to broker peace, and was killed by his own people for sympathizing with vampires. Mira listened, seeing the grief etched in every line of his face. I withdrew after that, ruled from isolation, convinced that humans and vampires were too different, too prone to fear and violence. But isolation is its own kind of death. Slowly, over decades, I felt myself becoming less
alive.
less connected to anything that mattered. He looked at her. So I started the tests, searching for proof that Thomas was right, that humanity was worth the effort, worth the risk of caring again. And did you find it? I found you, his voice was soft. One woman who reminded me what Thomas believed in, what he died for. Before Mira could respond, a new sound cut through the morning, hunting horns, distant but unmistakable. Valerius was at the wall instantly. Damn it. They've brought dogs. Dogs can track us. Bloodhounds, probably. Trained to track both human and vampire scent. He grabbed her hand. We need to move.
Now.
They ran through the forest, heading toward the coast. Behind them, the horns grew louder, joined by barking. The hunters were closing in fast. They burst from the tree line onto the coastal cliff path, the same path Mira had walked 5 days ago, carrying a stranger's wallet through an approaching storm. It felt like a lifetime ago. The tavern, Mira gasped, pointing. There it was, her little cliffside building, windows dark, signs swaying in the morning breeze. Too exposed, Valerius said. They'll trap us there. But Mira was already running toward it. Something pulled her home. Some need to see it one more time before everything ended. She burst through the door, unlocked, just as she'd left it, and stopped. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Tables clean, chairs arranged, her apron still hanging by the kitchen, waiting for her to return and resume her simple, honest life. A life that no longer existed. Valerius entered behind her. Mira, we can't stay. The hunting horns were right outside now. Through the windows, she saw them. At least 20 hunters, led by Commander Aldrich himself, surrounding the tavern. They'd known exactly where to look. Someone told them, Mira said. Someone in Saltmere told them this was my place. The bounty makes people do terrible things. Valerius moved to the door. I'll go out first, draw their attention. You run for the cliff path southward, toward. No, Myra's voice was firm. I'm done running. They'll kill you. Maybe, she moved to stand beside him. But I'm tired of being hunted for someone else's choices. If this ends here, at least it ends at home. Something shifted in Valerius's expression, surprise, respect, and something deeper. You're remarkable, you know that.
I'm terrified.
That's what makes it remarkable. They stepped out together onto the small porch. The hunters formed a semicircle, weapons drawn. Aldrich stood at the center, his weathered face satisfied. End of the line, Your Majesty, he called. No more tunnels to run through. No more shadows to hide in. Surrender the girl, and we might let you leave peacefully. No, Valerius said simply. Then we'll take her by force. And you'll die trying to stop us. Aldrich raised his hand, signaling his men to advance. Valerius stepped forward, and the air around him seemed to thicken. Power radiated from him, visible as a faint shimmer, like heat rising from stones. I am Valerius, he said, his voice carrying across the cliff. Not just a vampire noble, not just a lord, but the vampire king. Ruler of the night courts, bearer of the crimson crown, signatory to the Treaty of Divided Realms. His eyes blazed. And this woman is under my personal protection. Touch her, and you break not just my law but the treaties that keep our kingdoms from open war. The hunters faltered. Aldrich's face went pale. You're bluffing, he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Am I? Valerius pulled something from his coat, not a weapon, but a ring. Heavy gold with a red stone that seemed to contain trapped fire. The royal seal. Do you want to test whether I'm willing to plunge 2 kingdoms into war over one innocent human? Because I promise you, Commander, I am. The silence stretched. Mira held her breath. Finally, Aldrich lowered his hand. Stand down, he ordered his men. The hunters retreated slowly, weapons still drawn, but pointed at the ground. Aldrich stood his ground longer, his jaw tight with frustration, but even he couldn't risk starting a war. Not over one woman, no matter the bounty. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and dangerous. My king will hear of this. Your presence in human lands, your interest in this woman. It raises questions, your majesty. Questions that demand answers. Then I will provide them. Valerius's voice remained steady, commanding. Through proper diplomatic channels, as the treaties stipulate. Not through bounties and midnight hunts. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. And the girl? What is she to you, really? Valerius didn't hesitate. A reminder of what's worth protecting. Nothing more, nothing less. The word stung more than Mira expected. She stood silent on her porch, watching this negotiation that would determine her fate, unable to contribute anything but her presence. Finally, Aldrich nodded curtly. We'll withdraw.
For now.
But this matter will be brought before both courts. He looked at Mira then, and something like pity crossed his face. You picked the wrong stranger to help, girl. So I've been told, Mira said quietly. The hunters left, disappearing down the cliff path in formation. Within minutes, the only evidence of their presence was boot prints in the dirt and the lingering smell of spelled silver. Mira sagged against the doorframe, all the strength draining from her legs. Is it really over? For now, Valerius removed the royal ring, tucking it away. Aldrich will report to your king. There will be diplomatic meetings, formal inquiries. But the bounty will be withdrawn. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. Can I actually go back to my life now? Open the tavern, serve breakfast, pretend none of this happened. Valerius was quiet for a long moment. You could try, but people will know. Word spreads. The girl who the vampire king claimed as his protected. Some will respect it. Others will see you as tainted, as someone who consorted with vampires. He met her eyes. Your quiet life is gone, Mira.
I'm sorry.
She'd known it deep down. Had known since the moment she opened that wallet that nothing would ever be the same. But hearing it confirmed still felt like a stone settling in her stomach. What will you do? She asked. Go back to your castle? Resume your tests somewhere else? No, the word was firm. No more tests. That ends today. Mira looked at him in surprise. Why? Because you were right. Testing people's goodness as if it's an experiment, it's arrogant.
Cruel, even.
I was treating human decency like a rare curiosity instead of recognizing it for what it is. The daily choice of ordinary people to be better than they have to be. He stepped closer. You didn't pass some test, Mira. You just lived according to your values, and I nearly destroyed you for it. That's not something I'll repeat. Something shifted between them. An understanding, perhaps. A recognition of the cost of his games and her choices. I'm issuing a royal decree, Valerius continued. No vampire under my rule may conduct tests of humans. No more games, no more experiments. If we want to understand humanity, we do it through honest interaction, not manipulation. Will they follow it? They'll have to. It's a royal command, he smiled faintly. Besides, I have 3 centuries of authority backing it. My word is law in vampire territories. Mira walked to the cliff edge, looking out at the ocean. The same view she'd gazed at thousands of times, but now it felt different. She felt different, changed by everything that had happened, by violence and fear and unexpected kindness from the most unlikely source. I want to ask you something, she said without turning around. When you left the wallet, when you watched me decide what to do, were you hoping I'd keep it? Would that have been easier for you? Proof that humans are as selfish as you feared. Honestly, Valerius joined her at the cliff's edge. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe I wanted to have my cynicism confirmed, so I could stop feeling guilty about my isolation. Or maybe I was desperately hoping someone would prove me wrong, he paused. You did more than prove me wrong. You reminded me what it means to care about something beyond survival and duty. They stood in silence, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. You should take the coins, Valerius said finally. The ones you threw in the river. I have others. Enough to set you up anywhere in the kingdom. Start over completely. Change your name. Open a new tavern somewhere the hunters won't recognize you. I don't want your money.
I know. But take it anyway.
Not as payment for passing some test, but as reparation for the damage I've caused. He pulled a small pouch from his coat, setting it on the porch railing. Use it however you want. Rebuild here, start fresh somewhere else, or throw it in the ocean piece by piece. Your choice. Mira looked at the pouch but didn't touch it. What will you do now? After you issue your decree? Return to court. Face the diplomatic consequences of tonight. Try to prevent the mess I've created from escalating into something worse. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, meeting you changed me. Thomas would have liked you. The friend you lost.
Yes.
He believed in human goodness even when it got him killed. I'd forgotten how to believe in anything. Valerius met her eyes one final time. Thank you for reminding me. He walked away then, his black coat disappearing into the morning mist. Mira watched until she couldn't see him anymore, this vampire king who'd turned her life upside down searching for something he'd lost to himself. She looked at the pouch on the railing, picked it up, felt its weight. Enough gold to change everything. To run away, start over, become someone new. Instead, she walked back inside her tavern, set the pouch on the counter, and began preparing for the day. The sign flipped to open, water boiled for coffee. Bread dough was kneaded with practiced hands. Because whatever happened next, whether customers came or stayed away, whether her reputation was ruined or rebuilt, she would face it as herself. Mira, the tavern owner who once tried to return a lost wallet. The woman who refused gold. The human who taught a vampire king about kindness. As the sun rose fully over the ocean, her first customer arrived, old Samuel from down the road, who'd been coming for coffee every morning for 3 years. Morning, Mira, he said, settling into his usual seat. Heard you had an adventure. Thought you might need a friendly face. Mira smiled, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. Coffee, please. She poured, and as she did, she felt it, not quite peace, not quite closure, but something like acceptance. Her life would never be simple again. But perhaps, she thought, there was value in complication. In the connections forged through hardship. In the unexpected ways people could change each other. Outside, the ocean crashed against the cliffs, eternal and indifferent. Inside, a waitress served coffee to a friend, and somewhere in the distance, a vampire king learned to hope again.